Today's episode of Vice Versa, we're talking about Tesla's solar price hike, a spotlight on Sonors Motors, Ford's EV strategy, and more. And as usual, I'm joined by Ricky Roy, the guy who convinced me to buy Elon Musk's NFT song. How you doing, Ricky?
Doing well, Matt. Doing well. It was a late night last night getting our video done. Somehow it always creeps up on you. You think you have time to finish it, but enjoying today, and I have a 3-day weekend coming up, so I can't complain.
Yeah.
How about you?
It's been a good week. I had a video come out on green hydrogen, which was kind of an interesting topic to cover because it's kind of like it's hydrogen's dirty little secret that it's really dirty to make hydrogen, and what the future is going to look like.
How was the reception? Pretty good?
It's been pretty good so far. It's been pretty good.
Yeah, people really don't realize. They think of electrolysis, but it's like that is a tiny percentage of how we're making it currently. Things can change, and hopefully they do.
They can definitely change.
Also, I heard you got a new fan and follower on Twitter. Isn't that right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the video came out, and I got a tweet from, I don't know if anybody knows who this is, but Duncan Jones, who's the director of Moon and the Warcraft movie. He tweeted about my video and said he likes watching my videos, and the one about hydrogen was really interesting. And I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that tweet.
How cool is that? Yeah.
Holy cow. Yeah.
Our boy Maddie's going places. Yeah. So my video this week was on heat pumps. I got a couple of funny comments. The title of the video is probably interesting, and maybe not everyone loved it, but I pretty much said this heating technology defies the laws of physics pretty much, because the 500% efficiency is kind of a funny thing that people don't fully understand. I do cover it and talk about what I mean.
Yes, you do.
But it was clearly, the title was clearly made to intrigue. So that one was good. Looking forward to moving on, and let's start the show.
All right. Well, the first story, and this is going to be the big controversial topic of the evening, is Tesla hiking solar roof pricing on contracts that were signed over a year ago. This one is, I'm really interested to hear what Ricky's take on this is, but this is something that's been brewing over the past several weeks with, how can I put this? They've been more accurate in their estimates on how much a solar roof costs to install. Their original estimates were a little on the low side, and they've changed the way they do the estimates now, and it's more accurate for what it's actually going to cost to install. And it also looks like they've actually just kind of baked in some more actual costs that they've probably discovered just from installing them over the past, 6 months to a year. And it's been jacking up people's costs for what they're getting for the estimates. And when you sign a contract with Tesla, there's a clause in there that allows them to adjust the price after you've signed. And so they come back to you with a revised contract. And a lot of people are seeing costs that are increasing by, in some cases, 30% or more. And there's actually somebody that follows me and has been sharing with me his experience of getting solar roof. And he just contacted me before the show saying he's canceling his order because his cost doubled. His original cost after incentives was originally supposed to be $50,000, and it's now over $100,000. That is not insignificant. And the way that this whole thing has been handled is kind of shocking to me, because if you're that far off with the pricing structure based on the estimates, for customers who have already signed up, do you eat those costs and just correct it going forward? How do you handle it with those customers that are going to basically get sticker shock because they've already been planning, they may have been cutting down trees, doing prep work, spending money to get this stuff put into place, and they've been waiting months and months and months to just turn around and jack their costs up 20, 30, 40, 50%, or even double, depending on the situation. And you and I have both talked to installers about the solar roof. And what we've been told is, the costs don't line up always, because it's the complexity of the roof that really matters. And the original estimate was basically just, what's the square footage of the roof? Here's your cost. And the installers that I talked to from like Weddle & Sons, they drove home the fact that when they're doing the cost estimates, they were doing something very accurate because they're actually looking at the house and the complexity of the roof, and they were being called out by customers saying, why is your cost quote double what Tesla's giving us? We're going to go with Tesla, not with you, because you're so much more expensive. And it turns out they actually were probably the more accurate price because they were doing pricing based on the complexity of the roof structures. So what is your take on all of this?
I loved your video and the gentleman you spoke with.
Yeah.
And I did a similar video where I spoke with somebody from a company called Good Faith Energy. The CEO, his name's Mo, and they had the exact same feedback, which was we often heard what Mo kept saying is, we want your service, but we want Tesla's prices. And he tried to kind of tell them, the way Tesla's estimator is working, it is very much an estimation. And he even shared with me early days when they first started and they first rolled this out, they were actually just basing it on the square footage of your house. So if I had 1,000 square foot house, here's your quote, which is madness because it could be a ranch style house, it could be a 3-story house. I mean, there's no way you can estimate a roof based on the house square footage. Then they became more of a roof square footage and complexity, medium, complex. But this is not a situation where you can have a one size fits all type of an approach. You gotta nail this down properly. And so yeah, here's his installation. It's gorgeous, by the way. I mean, the solar glass roof is unbelievably beautiful. But the way they got estimations were wildly off. And I even got commenters who were giving me a hard time saying, how dare you say Tesla knows what they're doing and their prices are fine. And then this news breaks that they're readjusting. And what it comes down to really is the labor, is Tesla's Achilles heel. They aren't as equipped to understand the nature of what a roof takes,
Yep.
So I think they probably ought to focus on the product side. They should say, look, we make the best roofing tiles, and you guys should, and we're gonna go scale this up and make them by the bajillions, and let other like local installers potentially do the installation. Because my experience with Tesla service is not the best. Is probably the way I'd say it. You and I both got power walls from Tesla, so you had a tough time with a third party installer from other reasons and stuff. For me, Tesla themselves installed mine, and the first gentleman that showed up, I think he was just out of his league, didn't really fully know what he was doing. A second gentleman comes to help him, and the two of them get started, but now the day is late. They don't finish. They come back a second day. Kind of my house is kind of opened up and in a weird state for a while. They never came back and repaired the drywall and the stucco, which they were supposed to. And then 7 months later, after like radio silence, I'm getting messages now. Your bill is past due for the remainder that I owe for the installation prices. And I was like, you guys haven't finished the work, and you're telling me I'm delinquent on payments, and that really irritates me. I don't like when people say that I'm late on making payments if you guys haven't done the work yet. So I was on the phone with them, and it is like pulling teeth. The entire service department, I think, needs to go to like name a company that has like great customer service, like maybe Apple. There's some Neiman Marcus. Neiman Marcus I know has like the best. Costco. They need to like send their entire service department to school to like learn from the masters of how to do customer service, because it is a pretty bad experience currently. I kept getting passed on to person. They weren't like, let me get the person on, explain your situation, give them your name and your information, so they jump right in. It was like starting over again, over and over. And like 45 minutes later, I was like, God, I got to go back to work. What is this? So this is tough. Growing pains. I'm sure they'll get better at this, but my personal opinion has always been like, get out of the service business, just make products, make the best solar glass roof tiles, focus on that gigafactory in Albany, just scale that up, make it better, faster, leaner, and let these local installers who are really good at understanding how to do this, do this. Because I don't know why they want to be in the roof installing business. Like, that doesn't sound like a core competency. And whenever they do stuff that's not core competency, I think it doesn't work out well.
Yeah, from my point of view, it goes beyond just their solar business. It's Tesla in general. Their communications, it's something I've been saying. I've said in previous videos on my channel, their communications is not good. It's their Achilles heel.
Right.
And they have to fix that, because that's where the customer experience, the user experience, really comes home. It's like another good example would be Zappos. Zappos was kind of the golden child of customer service. You buy shoes, you're not happy, they'll change it out. No questions asked. Just send it back. We'll do whatever we have to do to make you happy. Hell, we'll give you the shoes for free. They'll do whatever they have to do. And on the flip side, you got Tesla, and it's a real mixed bag what your experience is going to be when you have to call them and deal with them day in and day out with some kind of customer service issue with your car or getting solar installed. I have somebody else that contacted me saying that they've been through 3 or 4 different solar reps. Like, you're given a point of contact when you get a contract with them. Their point of contact changed 3 or 4 times over the course of like 4 months. and each person handles it in a wildly different way. So they were going from periods where somebody was doing a fairly good job keeping them up to date, and then other people that was just like a black hole of information and they would never hear from them. So it's bad. It's like they've got to fix this because they do the engineering so well. They do the software so well. They're an engineering company from top down, but they need to nail this customer service and communications, and they don't have a PR group anymore. If they had a PR group that was totally
Right.
focused on how to present this information to the public, they could have gotten ahead of this solar roof issue before it just starts bubbling up from people complaining about their quotes doubling in cost. And then basically the green media, like you got the Clean Technicas and all those different websites start catching these articles and these stories start coming up. It's not a good look for Tesla at all. So this is something they really have to get ahead on. It's like if they want to
Yeah,
succeed, they got to nail this.
agreed. Agreed. I was thinking about what you said about the cars and the software. What they've done with their cars and their software is, well, the cars too, start in some small window of sales or regions and then kind of grow. The software is a rolling update. Not everyone gets Tesla software updates at the same time. They've got some kind of a rolling iteration, like a schedule. They'll go 10%, look for anomalies and stuff, gauge success, make sure there's no crazy crashers or anything, and then go 20%, 30%. It's like a staged rollout. A staged rollout would have made sense for their solar too.
Yeah.
Start in California, right? And California is pretty much like the solar gold mine, and start building here. Pick like LA, San Diego, San Francisco, Sacramento, 4 cities, and start doing it there. Get the process, understand, like get the training materials in line, get everything sorted out, and then expand and expand. Now we're in Nevada, now we're in New Mexico, and then slowly, or some sort of not this where it's like we're going to take over the whole world, and it shows like your armies are very thin everywhere. They're there, but it's not a good look. And we talked about this before the show. Elon reminds me a lot of Steve Jobs. They're both really intense leaders. Like they're brilliant and they're non-compromising and they're not like customer facing, meaning like you wouldn't want Steve Jobs taking a customer's complaint. He'd bash him and tell him you're an idiot and you're using it wrong. It's your fault, kind of a thing.
Yep.
That's why they have an entire department, one of the best, to deal with customers and problems and stuff. And Tesla's pretty much cut out theirs. And this to me, like people make all this talk about, oh, Tesla doesn't do any marketing, they don't do commercials, and we give them a lot of credit for all this stuff. To your point, from an engineering perspective, it makes sense. But this is a classic example of where they're getting bit by this. And I don't know what the future will hold, but hopefully they slow down a little and try to improve on quality and not quantity. At this point, that's probably the best thing they can do. It doesn't help to get people, like a roof isn't like a car. Like I have a Cybertruck reservation. So what? But if my roof is needing to be replaced and I'm like, oh great, I'm gonna get a Tesla solar roof, and you take 2 years to get to me, that's not good. Why not just say we're not offering it in your area until we are? Then I go, okay, well now I have a choice, and go from there. But
Right.
expectations and stuff are things I think they've got to your point, they got to nail this going forward. And I
You
think
just
they'll
you
get
just nailed
better.
it. Setting expectations is something they have to get better
Yeah.
at. Yeah. Want to go to the next story?
Yeah. Yeah. So the next story is related to something we've talked about in the past. Ford's first Volkswagen platform electric car is a small SUV. So this is a story that we talked about maybe a month ago, where I kind of said the Ford Mach-E is a little bit of a deceptive measure, because I don't think Ford is actually as well invested in electric vehicles as we thought. Because the Mach-E is individually brilliant. It's a fantastic car. But what about their deeper infrastructure? What about their deeper investment into the architecture of it? Well, Ford's Cologne factory, which is a factory in Germany, is investing about $1 billion to renovate to shift to EVs. Now, this isn't a factory in the US. This is a factory in Germany. Clearly, they know the writing's on the wall. These ICE cars are going to be banned, so they have to prioritize Europe first, and they're doing just that. So this is going to be the first car they're going to use the Volkswagen MEB platform. The MEB platform is their common standard platform that they use. The ID.4 is built on it, and so people are thinking that this car they're going to build will be like a little mini crossover SUV, even smaller than the Mach-E. This is the ID.4, so I mean, just to give you an idea of the proportions and kind of the size, it'll be the same platform that they'll ride on. But Ford, where's your where's your platform? You're a major automaker. You're not like some startup. Why aren't you investing in the same way as like General Motors or Hyundai has their own platform, VW has their own platform. Ford seems wildly content to just kind of ride it out and just kind of be a passenger in this move. And that's why like this Ford Electrification Center and stuff, really all they're doing is assembly, I think, at this point. Like you're just taking other people's components and putting your shell on it. So um, it seems wildly deceptive to me. I feel the Mach-E was such a great car that people were thinking, oh my gosh, Ford gets it. When really I think Ford gets it. Like, here's how you make a great car without actually having to do any of the hard work of like investing into the future of how we're going to build 50 of these kinds of great cars. So what do you think? What's your take on this one?
You and I are very much aligned on this. When I saw this article, it was just like, once again, just a big head shake for me. It's kind of like, okay, you got VW who's making this huge pivot. They're building their own like battery factories. They're going all EV. They have a whole lineup they've planned. You've got GM doing the same thing, building gigafactories of their own, and they're clearly making all the right moves. They built their own platform out too. And then you've got Ford who's coming out and supposedly, we talked about this a little bit before the show, of there's reports that Ford is investing something like $28 billion to electrify their lineup in the coming like couple decades. But I'm not sure where they're spending that money, because you've got GM spending the similar amount of money and they're saying, here's our new platform. Here's what we're doing. Here's all of our battery infrastructure. Here's our partners. Here's our gigafactories. You got VW doing the same thing. But Ford is partnering with Rivian. They've invested into Rivian. So they're using some Rivian technology. They're partnering now with VW. It's like, what? My mind just kind of freezes. I don't understand what they're doing, because they're seeding their future. This is not good planning for the future. And it makes me wonder, is there something else going on behind the scenes that they haven't announced yet that's going on? Because I can't explain the gobs of money that they're investing into this stuff, because it doesn't show. It's like what they're doing doesn't equate to what they're spending.
Like the Ford F-150, what is that? Is that going to just be a traditional truck with like batteries in the trunk or something? I mean, are you
Or is it
building this from
Rivian?
the ground up?
Or is it basically
Yeah,
a Rivian?
yeah, that's a good point. Which, yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Ford F-150 is like a full-size truck. Is Rivian a full-size or a mid-size? Like, is there limitations? And are there?
Right.
It's bizarre. You're a major OEM. You're one of the top. You have. It's kind of an interesting thing. I think they're going to suffer for this long term though, because if there's a shortage, if VW has battery issues or motor issues or anything else, the first
They're
thing they'll do is say,
dependent.
sorry Ford,
Yep.
you're out. We're not sending you anymore because we're going to focus on our own stuff. So you have so much of your fate is out of your hands. Sure, the capex is way lower. So I guess if you're a Ford investor, you're not serious about electric vehicles and you don't want to see them sink a lot of money until it's more proven. Maybe that's the same thing for Toyota, like they're just waiting to see what happens or something. I don't know. But GM and VW have proven that like their stocks have benefited from this idea that we're looking ahead. We're going to go all in and have battery days and things like that. So it very much stands in disagreement. Yeah, I can't quite square up that idea either.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. The next story, which is a completely like a right turn from that one, is there's a nice little motor company, that startup that's kind of coming up with a very interesting car. It's Sono Motors. They have developed a car. This is the reason that I thought this was interesting to talk about. Was we've talked about Aptera, which is building a solar powered car that's taking it into a completely different direction, where they've rethought what the aerodynamics and the whole structure of the car to make it super efficient so that it can run off as much of the solar energy it generates as possible. And here's a car company that's making a much more traditional looking kind of small hatchback car that is all solar panel. So on one side is like, that's pretty cool, but I hope you like black, because that's pretty much all this car is going to come in, because there's no paint, because this car is basically just a solar panel on wheels. They've got a proprietary method of creating the solar panels in the chassis itself. And some of the specs, it's 13 solar modules for 248 seamless solar cells. It has a range of about 150 miles, and it adds about 10 miles a day, or about 16 kilometers a day, from the solar that it can generate. And this is in, what was it, Germany? So it's like Could be cloudy weather, could be snow one day. So that 10 miles could be better depending on where you live. Um, one of the things I loved about this car was just the completely different take on Aptera, because Aptera for me, I'm not in love with the way the car looks. I think it's a little too out there for my taste, but
The Aptera?
I love the concept of what they're trying to do. And then now you have Sono Motors, which is doing something very similar, but it's a more traditional car. And it's like, for me, I'm much more excited about what Sono Motors is doing, because it's bringing solar to electric cars. Imagine just parking this in you're parking at work, you're parking at home outside, and it just tops itself off. So your drive home, it's all topped off, ready to go. You don't ever have to plug it in if you're just driving around, 15 miles a day or so like that. And it has bidirectional charging, which is also really funny, because I passed by it in the imagery. Here it is charging a Tesla, which I
Of
just love
course it is.
I love that image. It's a level 2 charger, so I think it maxes out at 11 kilowatts for the charging speed, I think is what it is. But still, that's really cool that you have a car that can generate its own power. You could plug it into your house during a blackout, and then it can still generate its own power during the day. It's pretty cool. I love this concept. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree. Ion Ghosh asks, what's the price and range? Price probably is not really fully defined yet,
No.
but I think the range is in the 150-mile range,
Yeah.
which is solid for a car with a 35 kilowatt hour battery pack, which will give you an idea of the price, really about the half the battery pack that you and I have in our cars. So couple that with the fact that you could have 15 miles of range a day from Germany, where the sun is not exactly guaranteed to shine each day very brightly. That might be 30 miles in California, and you might never have to charge it, which is kind of cool. That's the same promise as Aptera. Now, I don't think the Aptera has solar panels along the body panels. I think it's just the roof line.
Yeah.
This thing is covered in them, which is wildly
The
cool.
doors themselves. That's so cool.
Right. So I think even though it does just come in black, I think that alone kind of makes it just feel kind of futuristic. The shape in the car itself is quite, I'd say, mundane looking.
Yeah.
Very much in keeping with the hatchback obsessed European market. Like, European cars look just like that. They're maximum interior space for minimum exterior space, like for European roads and stuff. And that fits right in. It feels it feels like an easy sell. The Aptera, to me, as cool as it is, I'm wildly fascinated by it. I think the sales model has to be proven. How many people want to be driving around in a three-wheeler, and all that comes with it. And part of it is just perception. Even if you show people, like, here's the crash ratings and it's just as safe, people's minds, people are irrational. Like we always talk about, like, I have a son. I'm going to get him an SUV so he's safe. SUVs are the least safe vehicles ever made. They always are. They're high center of gravity, rollover machines. But we think of them as safe because they're big and heavy or something. So the rationalness might be a problem. So for that reason, Sono, I think, has as a winner, because it feels like a normal car. And you could potentially never have to charge it, which there's something cool about that. I really want to be able to say that I could just park outside and...
Well, even if
never
it
charge
doesn't charge it up fully, the fact that it just, like, half the power that you're using comes from the sun directly into the car. There's something so satisfying and cool about that. Talk about, like, an independent lifestyle. That's part of the reason why you get solar panels in your house, is to try to reduce your dependence on the
Absolutely.
grid. And here's a car that's reducing its dependence not just on the grid. It's like a little self-sustained little machine. I just love that. So cool.
Yeah, exactly. Robert says it has a very practical shape.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. But at the same time, it does kind of feel futuristic in certain ways. You know what I would love to see when you're driving, and it shows you like a little gauge that says your instantaneous watt hours per mile is this. Your solar generation is this. And it's like, how cool would it be, like, you're going downhill and I'm running on the sun, even as you're driving. And then when you're parked, clearly it tells you, in 3 hours, you'll be fully charged again. That'd just be so cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. That should be a fun one. And as more details are announced and they start shipping, we'll cover it more for sure.
Yep.
Ready for the next one?
Next up.
All right. So the next one is it's kind of connected to a story we did several weeks ago about more and more companies getting together and forming kind of coalitions to try to make EVs the norm as quickly as possible. So this is 80 companies with over $1 trillion in revenue call for 100% zero emission vehicle future by, at the latest, 2035. In the past, we covered how Lucid, Rivian, and Tesla were joining forces. That video did really well. They formed this pact called Zeta. It was the Zero Emission Transportation Association. The two that we're talking about today are the Corporate Electric Vehicle Alliance. You gotta love these names. Whoever comes up with it, I'm guessing their profession is lawyer. Is my guess.
Yeah.
The second one is, this is great. This is a
This is
fun
my favorite one.
The Business for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy, or BICEP.
BICEP.
That's just, you can't make that stuff up. So these are groups of companies that, you know, probably don't stand to lose very much. Like, for example, if you're Whole Foods or Walmart, you don't lose money by mandating that cars become electric. In fact, you look cool and it sounds great for you to say that. And potentially maybe you save money by having lower cost. So I think what you'll see is companies that benefit from the great PR and the fact that it doesn't really hurt their business to say this will be the first ones to join. But these kinds of companies are powerful, especially together. I mean, we talked about $1 trillion in yearly revenue. So the idea is they can lobby and try to make sure that lawmakers get involved, because their core thesis is that as great as all this stuff is, that we need to get government involved. So, you know, here's a little quote here. This is better than nothing, but real change is only possible from government legislation. The climate crisis will require World War II levels of reallocation of capital and resources that is only possible when the government mandates it. So I would say that probably flies in the face of what I typically say, which is that kind of the economics of this are going to what'll win out. But what do you think? Clearly, there's going to be more interest in organizations like this to push for this, but it seems to come with the idea that government has to fix it because otherwise it won't happen. What's your take on that? I'm curious.
I'm in the camp of, I think the government does need to step in. This is one of those areas where it's like the United States is lagging behind, and you have the EU doing some very
Definitely.
clear mandates to push things forward. We need that here, but there hasn't been the political will to do it. And so even though this really is symbolic for what these companies, this consortiums are doing, BICEP, I do love that it's sending a clear message, and the fact that this is a huge, like $1 trillion worth of, you know, revenue in the U.S. economy is coming up to our government, basically saying, you got to do something about this. That's going to give kind of a good incentive. It kind of puts wind in the sails for people in the government to try to do something about this, to get policies pushed forward. So it's symbolic. It's not really going to change anything now, but I'm hoping stuff like this can help persuade certain lawmakers that might be resistant to kind of rethink their stance.
Yeah, I'm torn on this one. You know, I made a video talking about, you know, we had this, you know, Biden's going to have this entire federal electrified fleet, and then the USPS trucks for the next 30 years were, you know, we're
We're not talking about that
to
one
be
ever
built
again.
by the Oshkosh Corporation, and it's going to be largely gas. And, you know, I think there's just a lot of unintended consequences and stuff that come out from it. I'm trying to think of maybe an example. Give me a week to think about it for the next show. But yeah, the cleanest way would just be, look, I'm not buying a gas car. Are you crazy? This exploding engine with millions of moving parts that's wildly unreliable and wastes 70% of the energy that it consumes. I don't want that. I want to go the simple, clear route. Just get the electric car that'll last 1 million miles and be on your way. So I really hope that, but at the same time, the federal tax credit is a government thing, right? If Biden brings back the 7,000 for Tesla and makes it 10,000 for all the other companies, that'll do wild things for EV adoption.
Yes.
Because now we're talking about cars that are actually cheaper than their gas equivalent, and also the at the time of sale rebate rather than having to file your tax at the end of the year. So if that kind of stuff happens, I think we'll clearly see big moves in this arena. But the government's role in all of this is, yeah, I get it. I do think there's a role for them to play. I just hope that they don't start getting into the business of like picking winners and losers, which we talked about how
Yeah.
the federal fleet has to be from companies that have unions, which means I could be wrong about Lucid and Rivian. I'm not 100% sure, but I know Tesla's not unionized workforce, which means all these companies are out of the running. So
Yep.
you're going to be buying Mach-E's and Bolt or something. So now you're picking winners and losers, and it feels very, I don't know. I'd rather just see a free market on it. You know, Tony Seba, I love hearing his lectures and stuff. He talks about how like solar is already the winning formula. Like it already wins on economics today. That's why we don't see new natural gas plants being built. People are moving to solar, even in places like India, where you would think they'd probably, be behind us a couple of years. They're building like huge solar farms. And I think EVs are on the cusp as well, especially when you factor in that we have more and more of them being made, more battery factories being made, and the costs just keep coming down. And gas prices are going back up. You notice that the gas prices are kind of back to pre-COVID levels all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Here we're paying about $4 currently. So the
Which is
savings
still
are
cheap.
wild.
Which is still cheap compared to other places.
We have some Europeans on our chat. Yeah. Yes, it is still cheap. It's about half the price that you guys pay.
Yes.
But the rest of America pays half of what I pay. Just think about that. A lot of America is paying a fourth of what the rest of the world is paying for gas. So that's really part of why we're where we are and way behind in some regard. But let's talk about this a little more, I think. Maybe there needs to be some more concrete like actions that these organizations are taking, right?
Yeah.
It all just feels kind of abstract until there's like, hey, we got together, we passed this law, it does this, and as a result, X, Y, and Z. And when I see the data, I'll be the first to change my mind. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah. Well, keep tabs on it.
Keep tabs on it.
So the last story of the night is one that was actually suggested to me by one of my Patreon members. His name is Al Beeman. I really want to thank him for suggesting this. But he brought up the question of, with full self-driving and robo-taxis coming at some point, how are we going to be charging them? And he suggested talking about wireless charging, which I've done a video on this on my channel about a year ago. I actually interviewed the CEO of a company called Witricity, which is the kind of the leader in the field. In fact, they own pretty much all the patents. So if you see any wireless electric charging stuff from any company, chances are Witricity is like one step right behind them because they own the patents to everything. But the reason that I thought this was worth talking about was just, I think it was at the end of last year, the SAE organization kind of ratified the J2954 standard, which is a global standard for wireless charging. So we now have a standard that every company can now get behind. So this basically means any charger will work with any car as long as it's following this standard. And this did not exist before. It took over a decade. You want to talk about moving at the speed of business? This is how slow standards bodies move. It took, seriously, Witricity and other companies over a decade to standardize this. But the standard now basically gives you 11 kilowatt hour charging rates on these wireless chargers. And if you don't know much about wireless chargers, these are not the same as the induction chargers that you get on your phones. Induction chargers are the coil in the charger is not in sync with the coil that's in your phone. And it requires a very, very close contact for the charge to work. And then you just get a few centimeters away and the power drops. This is magnetic resonance charging, where the two coils are in sync at a very specific like megahertz range. I can't remember what it is, 85 megahertz or something like that, where they're completely in sync at the same resonance. And it allows it so that you can have a gap that could be feet and doesn't even have to be centered over each other completely. It can be off axis, somewhat further away. And then you can have these repeaters where you could actually have a room that's just full of these repeaters. And no matter where your phone is in the room, it could be charging. It's kind of crazy, trippy stuff. And it's completely safe. So this standard is going to potentially change everything as far as how we charge our cars autonomously. Because if you think about having a taxi fleet that just pulls up into spots and they can start charging because they're above a spot. Imagine taxi cab stands like you're at an airport and you have a taxi cab row of like 20 taxis waiting for people. Imagine chargers just in the road along that entire taxi cab stand. So these taxis, as they're coming up and they're waiting for people to get on board, they're actually just topping off while they're waiting for somebody to get in the car. Parking garages. There are parking garages in China that are actually already starting to build this kind of stuff out, where they're putting these wireless charging pads in all of the spots in parking garages. Put this in your home. I mean, the picture I was pulling up here before is one for a BMW that they've been doing for the past couple of years that's using the Witricity technology. They sell this as an option for some of their cars. It's like you could put this in your garage. So you come home, you pull into the garage, and then you just get out and go inside. You don't ever have to think about plugging in your car ever again. And so this is really the kind of way forward for autonomous driving. When you have a robo taxi, you send it out, it needs to top off, it just pulls into some spot, or it's taxi cab stands where it's automatically charging up. And as a owner, even beyond autonomy, it's like imagine this being in parking lots. Like you go to this sort of shop and you just pull into a spot like you normally would. You don't even have to think about it. Your car's topping up while you're shopping or at work. It's this to me could really change everything. The fact that it's 11 kilowatts, it's fairly slow, but that's where it's starting today. When I talked to Alex Gruzman, he had talked about how there's the possibility for this to get up to fast charging speeds, not 130 kilowatt range. You're talking maybe something like 50, 60 kilowatts. You can get it up there. It will get there eventually, but I don't think it needs to be at that fast charging speed, because if you just put these pads pretty much everywhere, it doesn't matter that it's slower. It's like no matter where you're parked or your car is stationary, it's just going to be picking up a free charge. What's your take on this?
Yeah, before I do, I want to ask you a question. So, the minute you mentioned wireless charging, a lot of the more scientifically minded people jump in, and there's been a lot of chat that it's wildly inefficient because of losses and stuff. You touched on this because you mentioned this isn't induction charging, which is what you're typically used to.
Right.
Do you have any numbers on efficiency?
Yes. It's 99% efficient. Between the coils, it is 99% efficient.
So you pump 10 kilowatt hours and your car is getting
basically getting the full
9.99.
amount.
That's wildly.
So on the Witricity stuff, there's a box that you'd install on the wall, which is the inverter. It's converting, from AC to DC. And there's an efficiency loss in there, but between the coils, there's essentially no loss. It's 98 to 99% efficient. And that's at a huge gap, more than you would actually need for the car. For the car, you're talking like 18 inches. The way Alex put it to me was, when you talk about going from the grid into the car, it is about 90 to 93% efficient, which is in the same exact range as the wall chargers that you have in your home.
Yeah.
There's zero difference between plugging it in physically and using a wireless charging system that's magnetic resonance charging. Completely different from induction. It's built on induction, but it takes it to a level where the efficiency is completely there. It's really cool. It's neat stuff.
Exactly. And I want to make that really clear to the viewers. Not the Qi charging that you're used to for your phone. This is different. One, Matt does have a video on this. We will put a link to it in the description or pin it somewhere. But go to his channel and check it out. Wireless charging, you'll find it. He has talked to like the CEO, I believe, of the company that does it. Really fascinating video. And the end result is pretty shocking. We have a way of kind of thinking, oh, wireless, it's going to be too inefficient, too many losses. But really, really fascinating stuff. And to your point, yeah, I don't think of it really as kind of a, this or that. Are we going to get rid of this to have this? I think the floor mounted wireless charging is just a no brainer. You just, wherever you're sitting, a car could be charging. Suddenly the need for batteries reduces, right? If every time a taxi is sitting at the airport waiting for the person to come, and if you're grabbing a little charge, or when you park somewhere, wherever you go, you can just grab a quick charge. We can reduce the need for some of the range and battery figures and stuff. And it's a clear winner, because otherwise, I think somebody mentioned the snake charger. Mark Plot says, Jake the snake charger. Yeah, so otherwise, you're talking about robots driving around plugging in plugs, which feels wildly like antiquated. As cool as a robot is, that seems really weird. The whole plug-in thing, that's for humans. Like, if you're doing this in an automated fashion, why would you go that route? That's crazy. That's like rather than using like an API to access data online, it'd be like programming a robot to type on your keyboard. Why would you do that? That's like wildly inefficient. So time will tell, but I do think what you're describing will factor in large in terms of like, long-term parking lots at airports, or rather than having charging stalls. Imagine charging is just built in, and maybe we get the demand high enough and they can pump these charging pads out at cost. And it wouldn't cost that much more. That's what somebody mentioned, even if it's efficient, it'll cost more than a normal plug. But remember, like, a charging stall is not cheap either. So
yeah, it's eventually we'll get there. It's like Qi charging took a long time to roll out into all the phones, and now it's pretty much universal. It's like at some point, this will just become another universal thing that's just built into all EVs.
Bong Hollywood says, program a robot to use an abacus. That's what I was kind of thinking, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Just build a robot that can compute. And also, yeah, so check out Matt's video on it. It's definitely cool. And thank you to the patrons for both of our channels. If you guys have questions and you bring them up to us, like always, let us know. We will try to cover them. That's really cool that we were able to do that for your viewer. And Al, hopefully that kind of breaks it down. And the really cool part about this is SAE has made this a standard, which means now it's not like some secret sauce that one company has. This is good news. This is going to mean, imagine if cars just have kind of a receiver coil on the bottom mount, and that becomes kind of a standard fare on all cars. That's the sort of standardization you get when SAEs get involved. So cool story.
That was the last story of the night. So now we're going to transition, as usual, to the Q&A portion of the show. So we're going to start combing through more of the messages, chime in, ask questions.
Dan Curro says, install a Neuralink in my dog to have him remember to plug in the car charger. That's brilliant. That's actually the lowest
there you go.
Lowest effort solution. That'll work.
Occam's razor.
Yeah. Mao Zedong does not believe in wireless charging is not the future. He is adamantly opposed to it. So we can kind of scroll back, and he's mentioned a couple of things, but I'd like to hear more about that. But the standardization is really how you drive adoption for sure.
Eric said it's like charge grazing, which is exactly what it is.
I like that term. We should start a wireless charging company and call it charge grazing.
What's funny is when I was talking to Alex, they said the original idea when they first came up with it, it was invented at MIT, was you could embed this in roadways and you wouldn't need to put big expensive batteries into cars. You could have a very small battery because your car would just always be getting energy from the road itself. And the idea was it might be cheaper to go that route than to get batteries cheap. But batteries got cheap way faster than they ever expected. And so then it was like, okay, that doesn't make sense. And so it's like, well, how does this still make sense? And that's part of autonomy, putting it into parking spots, taxi cab stands. That's the kind of area where it makes the most sense.
Ian Ghosh says, I didn't realize these wireless chargers were so efficient. That's why I really wanted to make that clear, that, the 99% number. And he says, could they be used in bus stops and depots? Absolutely.
Yep.
The charge rate limits might play a role there, but expect that to improve over time. But that's exactly, everywhere the bus stops, imagine if you could just give a little bit of a charge.
Exactly. Have you read the latest QuantumScape report? I have not.
No, I wrote to Isaiah. I
it.
told him we'll take a look and maybe we can talk about it next week. I
haven't read it either.
Couldn't even start it. Yeah.
Peter Young asked, do you guys think Tesla is into too many industries? What's your take?
I don't. I think every industry they're in is core competency. I think what they need to do is get out of the installation business. Like, you're not roofers, and nothing about Elon Musk and his brilliance makes him a good roofer. He doesn't have the foggiest, right? So I would just say stick to your core competency. Being the most brilliant innovators of solar glass roof tiles, that's core competency. Do that and just scale that up. You don't need batteries for that product. Why is there a shortage? Why aren't they coming out of that gigafactory by the bajillions, right? Go optimize that. Have that Model 3 ramp up moment where this product just goes moonshot. And let people who already know how to install roofs really well, let them do that. You don't need to be working with like Wichita, Kansas, and go get 5 people certified to install roofs. Well, I just don't understand the rationale for that. So I would say that industries they're in are great. Just get out of the installation and stuff. Like, just be a product company.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't necessarily think that's... I think if they were just better at setting expectations, like we talked about earlier, it's like when they were getting into the solar roof, like if they were more targeted and really just honed in on specific regions to really kind of kick the tires and discover what the gotchas are. I think they communicated too early what they thought the costs were going to be, and then they discovered what the costs actually were, and it was greater than they were expecting. So I think they kind of got caught and didn't set expectations properly.
I think it's also a little bit. Do you remember the stories about how when they were ramping up the Model 3, there was a report that Elon was basically trying to automate the entire thing. He
Yeah.
wanted like no humans anywhere. He wanted a robot to this stage, to that stage, to that stage. Uh, Things that stand out to me were the wiring harnesses that run kind of centrally through the tunnels of these cars are pretty easy for a person. They kind of get in there and wildly difficult for a robot. And he was trying to automate. He was trying to over automate. And then finally, when things got better, was when he realized, look, let's hire some people. Let's break this down a little bit and let's get this thing going. And once they did that, things worked out. I think they're trying to maybe over automate, trying to make it so you can get a quote. I mean, I don't think any roofer, and I bet you the person you spoke with or me, if you told them, hey, let's make a web applet where there's complex, medium, and simple, and a user will click one of those 3 buttons for a roof and we'll have our answers. They're like, are you crazy? We have like a whole system. We're measuring every opening and easement, every protrusion and vent from the bathroom. Yeah, it just it feels like they have some. Maybe they need to just kind of have a little bit of humble pie on that and realize like there's a lot of complexities here that, and people have already figured this out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe focus on the product part. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Thanks for the super chat, John. He says, I wonder if we could wirelessly charge a pacemaker. Pacemakers do charge wirelessly now, but this would not interfere. It's like, it's one of the things that they talk about in the spec is like, this will not interfere with things like that in people. It's like, it's completely safe. So it won't mess with pacemakers.
So Mao Zedong is proven to be a very active member tonight. I'm not sure if I remember seeing him on the show before, but he says renewable energy such as solar is not environmentally responsible because a natural gas plant is used to fill the solar flaws. So I think he's talking about what happens at night when solar's not shining. So natural gas plants can be turned on and off. So they're peaker plants. They don't have to run 24 hours a day. And I think we can all agree that if while the sun was shining, you could have solar and not use natural gas, and then at night use natural gas, you're still using half the natural gas. That sounds pretty good. And then you throw in batteries and a million different other things. I think if you're looking to prove why renewables aren't going to work, you can find little excuses and arguments, but progress is, it's not like you go from nothing to everything. Progress is 5%, it's 6%, and then 8%. California puts out a report every year, my utility company, about how much of my energy is renewable. And since I bought my house about 10 years ago to today, that number goes up about 1.5%. It was, I forget the numbers now, but it's up over 40% now compared to 20 when I bought the house. So that's progress, and battery storage and things, which I think we're going to be covering more in the future, help solve that too.
Agree 100%. Oh, the Batman.
Batman.
Yeah. Thank you, Batman. Any thoughts on integrating wireless charging to Lucid's Wonderbox for vehicle to grid or grid to vehicle charging at 350 kilowatt rate? Whoa. Yeah.
There's a lot there.
That's a
Thank
lot.
you
That's a
for the
lot.
super chat, first of
Thank you
all.
very much. That's a lot to pick apart. I don't think it could do 350. I don't think you'd ever get close to that. Everything I've been told and heard, you're talking about something probably 100 and less. I do believe it does go bi-directional, so you could do vehicle to grid with a wireless pad if you wanted to. It is technically feasible. I don't think it's in the spec that was just put together, but it is possible for the future.
Yeah, I don't think there is any plan. I've heard nothing about any kind of wireless charging integration to their inverter Wonderbox package. But if it did eventually with the standard, like maybe the next generation of Air, the next generation of Rivians, and next generation of Teslas, they'll have this wireless charging standard. But yeah, it probably not hit their full speed.
Oh, this is struck me funny. James Paul's supercharged pacemaker. What could possibly go wrong?
For those people who don't have 4 seconds to waste charging their pacemaker, gotta
You
speed
don't need
that up.
Red Bull. You don't need Red Bull. Just supercharge your pacemaker. What could go wrong?
This is a good question. I'm curious on your take on this one. What do you think to give solar a net metering or wholesale price? Yeah, from Sandeep. Um, Basically saying you make 1 kilowatt of electricity at noon and then at 8 p.m. you need one. Is your bill zero? Or do they credit you their wholesale price, which is what they buy electricity for, which is 1 penny, and then they charge you 10 pennies, which is what they sell electricity for? What do you think about that?
I think eventually when solar's more ubiquitous, I think that's what it should be. It should be wholesale prices because you are basically just a generator, so you should be getting the same price. Right now, while you're trying to incentivize solar, I think it should be the 1-to-1 so that you put in one and you need one 10 hours later, you should get one back, which is what I have here in Massachusetts. It's a full 1-to-1 net metering. It doesn't matter the time of day or anything like that. So I put 1 kilowatt in, I get 1 kilowatt out. Eventually, I think that should go away at a certain point, but for right now, I think that's a really good incentive to get more people on board.
Yeah, I think you're right because I like what you said at the very beginning, which is long term. If you're serious about this, like if I have if I have a power plant on my roof, well then why should I be like artificially granted higher prices than I should? It all kind of factors to long term. I think wholesale is the answer. It should just
Mhm.
be like anything else. If you're a nuclear power plant, you're a windmill, you're a wind turbine, you're a whatever you are, you get the wholesale price, and it'll incentivize people to have batteries and basically just lower
Yes.
their use. Maybe the grid is just for peace of mind. Like maybe I have 3 cloudy days in a row, and I'd hate to be without power for no reason, so I'll keep the grid. But otherwise, I make and store my own power, which is I'm actually pretty much there. I watch my numbers, and I'm at about 100%, like
Wow.
93% offset so far in April, and that is my entire house. I run my business from my house. We're always home, and my EV charging, all of that, and I can pretty much use and store all of it. So pretty cool. Dan said, I'm not sure. Let's see if I can track this back. Jim says, okay, I'm thinking to get a battery from a used Tesla for home battery, and Dan says, go lithium iron phosphate, and I agree. Lithium iron phosphate really is kind of like it's like it doesn't get enough credit. It is a wildly brilliant technology. It doesn't have too many of the exotic chemicals and stuff. It's quite sustainable that way, and the cycle life is
It's huge.
like 3,000-4,000 cycles, which means we're using this thing for 20 years. So huge fan of lithium iron phosphate batteries, and I think you'll see them more in shorter range car options as well as a lot of stationary power.
When you're talking home battery usage, it's like you don't have to worry about weight. Size
Doesn't
isn't as
matter.
much of a concern, so it's like go that route. I agree.
Bong Hollywood, who's also a San Diegan, mentions that he has his car charged in his house, and San Diego Gas and Electric owes him $8 for April. It's pretty awesome. Good feeling, I gotta say.
There's nothing better than your electric company paying you. I love it.
Yeah, I know. It really is cool. Isaiah Miller, who had a good question earlier about QuantumScape, he asked, "You guys had an awesome conversation about closed loop life cycles a couple weeks ago. Would love to hear about battery recycling." I have a video planned, so not next week, but the week after that, so 2 weeks from now, I think I'm finally going to be able to pull the trigger and do a battery recycling video. Uh, are you going to beat me to the punch? Will you have one in the next two
I'm
weeks?
I'm going to be having one soon. You're going to beat me to
Okay.
it, but I am going to
Okay.
have one very close to that.
So Maddie and I have been trying to reach out to like the industry experts and try. We don't want to just give you a topical overview of whatever you can read on Wikipedia. We want to try to get deeper insight. And so once we have that information, we'll definitely cover it on our channels in depth.
Yep.
One more I wanted to touch on, Matt. Unnamed Man 001 says, "Who's putting solar panels in the trash? They last more than 30 years." I'm looking for the reference to the earlier comment, but I'm happy to tell you, I don't know if I told you, my solar panels, the first 5 I ever got, will be 10 years old in a month. 10 years old.
Wow.
In that time, I was a bachelor, just came out of school, bought my first house. I've had like 3 cars since then, 2 refrigerators, probably 5 laptops or something, if not more, 8 phones, right? I got married, had 2 kids. The only thing as constant in my life has been I still have the same house, and my panels have never required a second of anything. They look great. The production is well over 95% 10 years later, and 94%, I think, the last time I calculated. And they look fantastic, and I think they'll last probably another 30, 40 years after that. It'll degrade, but incredible. There's really few things that last like that.
Super chat. YJK, thank you so much for the £5. Cheeky way
Let's
to get
go.
the attention, but can you check my 2 comments above? Looking for
I'm
them
looking.
right now.
I'm looking.
Scanning
Okay,
the
I
feed.
found. Did you? Okay, I found one. So YJK again, thank you for super chat. He says, "Hey guys, any way one of you or both could break down the different aspects of environmentalism, such as uh, plastic elimination, more or less important than reducing carbon footprint?" Fantastic question. Should we just start with that, and I'll keep looking? Why don't you tackle
I
that,
found
and
the
I'll
other
look
one.
for his
Well,
other. You did.
I don't know if I found the other one. No, I did not.
So while you're looking, while Matt's looking, I'll start with this one. This was probably a mistake. I'm a huge documentary film fan. I watch documentaries probably too much because most of them are wildly depressing, and I try to be optimistic and be more be more uplifted. But I watched Seaspiracy. Have you watched that on Netflix?
No, not yet.
Uh, I think I've told you before, I'm a huge fan of Japanese food. So like sushi, poke, I love fish. If I had to choose between, I'd be happy to give up all the other meat and just eat fish. I'd have no problem with that. Zero. But I do love sushi. And the whole show is about how basically there is no way to really sustainably fish. Um, when 7 billion humans are trying to catch fish, we do some horrible things to the ocean. And in the documentary, one thing they break down was that we've kind of demonized plastic straws and these kind of obvious outliers, kind of like finding an enemy and we can all point at it and feel good about ourselves. When the real problem they mentioned is that 46% of the Pacific garbage patch is recycled, old, thrown away fish net. So it's these big fish nets that are thrown out. And no one talks about that because, well, what do you do about that? Every country has a fishing industry and you'd be putting people out of work. It'd be a huge problem trying to tackle. So the question is so massively difficult. I just think human beings are very expensive. We require so much sacrifice from the rest of the planet to keep one person alive. And now there's 7 billion of us. And things seem kind of dire. But one thing I will say, almost every population on Earth is kind of decreasing. People are having less kids. So I think we might actually see a future and people project, oh, there's going to be 50 billion people and we're doomed. I actually think maybe the Earth has 5 billion people 60, 100 years from now. I think we have that wrong because as levels of education and things rise, populations tend to fall. What do you think? Maybe I've rambled on too long.
I was gonna say on that count, everything I've seen on that, we're gonna hit max human at 10 billion, and then it will start to go down slowly. It's just the natural way that we're all evolving on this. So it's not like we're gonna be 30 billion people deep. It's like we're gonna hit mass people, and it will start to decline. The breakdown of like one over the other, I struggle with that because it's like I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's a little bit of everything. I think it's important for us to each reduce our carbon footprint, but also, getting rid of plastics is we kind of got to do that because we're basically slowly poisoning ourselves and the planet with this wonder material that became a thing. Like the movie The Graduate. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Plastics. It's like that he wasn't wrong. That was the future,
No.
but it's also kind of haunting us now. It's such a massive thing to take. It's like it's part of the reason I don't like when people zone in on one thing about solar or wind as, oh, that's why you shouldn't do it. It's like, no, this is a step in the right direction. This may not be perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a little bit here, a little bit there. So I will take what I can get, whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, and we need more people who are looking to the future. So if you have that energy, you have an idea, get some funding, start a company, give it a shot. I mean, you'll remember those stories in your life later on. So yeah, there's hope. There's hope for us. I'm not ready to give up just yet. A big shout out to John Check for his super chat. He says a friend of mine with a Mustang Mach-E had to scope out RV parks for charging, or else he wouldn't have been able to charge his vehicle on a trip to northern Montana, I believe. MN.
Yeah.
Sorry, or Minnesota.
I think
I think it's Minnesota.
wow, we live in this country. We don't know what that is.
um, northern states with, yeah, Montana or Minnesota. John, if you're there, chime in. We feel bad.
I think it's Minnesota.
Okay, Minnesota. So the question first and foremost is you can't use Teslas, so now you're using Electrify America or EVgo, Blink. There's a lot of other ones out there. I'm actually curious if your friend was using something like an aggregation service like PlugShare, where they show you everything and everything available. I'd imagine there might have been some other options. If that really was the case, that's tough. But it is the early days of EVs, and there are some routes out there that are probably not fully optimized. And yeah, they mentioned Minnesota, and that's kind of crazy. For us here in California, I'd imagine the same for Massachusetts. You could pretty much go anywhere. There's not a dot in California you couldn't go to without. They're everywhere. Yeah,
They're everywhere.
But if that is one of the places where you live, maybe you just got to be patient and wait a couple more years and trust that it'll roll out.
Quick follow up to the plastic thing. Peter brought up, will banning plastic be replaced with something more harmful? I don't think it would be. And it's funny because I was actually just looking at this today because like we use plastic sandwich bags, stuff like that at my house. And I was like, is there something better we could be using? There's a material that's called, I think it's BPI. It's like there's a standard, and it's basically made from plant resin, and it's actually compostable. The problem is that it has to be industrial compostable, which is really high heat compost. So it's not like you can do this in your backyard.
Got it.
And there's not a lot of those places around yet, but stuff like that, it gives you the same benefit. It looks just like a regular plastic cup or a regular plastic bag, but it's just made out of something that's not traditional plastic. It's not made out of oils. It's made out of plant materials. And it could actually be broken down. So that to me is where I think some of this stuff is going to eventually go in that route.
Yeah, well said. And I think we need to put pressure on these companies. One thing we're really bad at as people is understanding like life cycles of products, right? You notice if you buy an iPad or a TV, I don't know if you have this in Massachusetts, but here in California, we have this like $5 or $15 LCD recycling fee built in. Like when I buy a TV, I'm paying to have it disposed of on day one, right?
That's
this is
cool.
California.
No,
we
but
pay for
that's
everything.
cool. That's cool.
It's cool if that's what the money is used for. And when
Yeah,
it comes to,
Yes.
who knows?
Yes.
I told you a story about the road tax, and then 2 years later, a law that says actually use that money for improving roads. Like, what the heck were you doing with my money all these years? But the full life cycle has to be studied. And when we, for example, carbon caps and cap and trade and these kinds of policies, if we were to do the same thing for plastic, you'll innovate and you'll force people to come up with something better. And there's some plant-based solution out there that'll be wildly improved. You just throw it in the ground, and in 5 months it decomposes entirely, and it just becomes plant food and worm food. There's an answer out there, and some brilliant person's going to figure it out. We just have to put the incentive structure. Yeah.
And the other side of it is like some of the stuff is going to be expensive to start, and then over time it'll get cheaper because as mass production happens, it gets cheaper and cheaper to make. So while some of the stuff like the BPI stuff I brought up is very expensive right now, in time that stuff should drop in cost.
By the way, plastic was expensive when it first came out. It was a luxury thing. Only rich people had plastic. That's how everything goes. And now plastic is like seeping out of our pores. People have mentioned about like microplastics being found in the Arctic, and it's a real mess of it. Yeah, we got to quickly enter what I would call like this next evolution of our species, where we're a little more smart. We're not just like burning everything we can find in sight and like not taking care of our planet. Hopefully it happens sooner than later.
Yep. Well, it's actually that time for us to kind of start to wrap here. Anything else you want to cover before we jump?
We didn't push liking enough because we didn't even hit 100.
We didn't even get 100.
If you guys are watching, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, subscribe and hit that like button. Let's get the numbers up, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Don't forget, every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And we also have an audio version of the podcast at viceversa.show. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.